I'm Betty Good Old Hooks. I was born in 1936, so I was kind of young when the soldiers had the big maneuvers here in this area, and they dug foxholes behind our house. I mean, like 100 yards behind our house. And the soldiers were down there, and we used to bake cookies and fix coffee and go down and give them coffee and cookies. And it was interesting. We were just children, but it was an amazing time. All these strange people, just everywhere. They were in town. You couldn't go to town without, the streets were just crowded with soldiers. And, we were all very nice to soldiers. And I can remember my dad, if we were going anywhere and some of them were hitchhiking, he'd stack as many as he could. He'd stop along the road and put as many as he could to take them as far as he was going. And, today we wouldn't do that. But back then they picked the soldiers up and give them a ride to Lake Charles or anywhere the way they were going. And I can remember all the horses. And I understand that not long after they had the maneuvers, several years later, that they did away with the horses. They had the jeeps and motorized vehicles, and they had no use for the horses. And I remember one horse that came up to our house, and our dogs would chase her off, and she'd come back, and finally my dad was a horse person. He loved horses. He just took her in, and he realized that she was pregnant. So she had that colt. But these horses, these men were so attached to their horses that they realized they were taking them by the trainloads and taking them to the so-called glue factories to kill them. And they would take their horses out and just turn them loose. And there's still a herd of wild horses, I understand, up at Fort Polk. But lots of people ended up with some of the soldiers' horses that they just turned loose. It was an interesting time to grow up. I think it was a wonderful time. We didn't have a lot, but we didn't do without. My mother raised our beef, and she always had hogs that they butchered. We had chickens, and she always had a great big garden. And this was the time that we lived in. And Mama always told us that we didn't have to be afraid of the soldiers. Says, they're just people, they're men. They, just like our men, they put their pants on one leg at a time. I can remember Mama saying that. But we were nice to them. But it was just an interesting time, and it was a strange thing to happen suddenly that they had these huge maneuvers in this area. When I was 14, I started working at Morgan Lindsay, downtown DeRidder. And I've seen a lot of these old buildings just let go and tore down. I married Jimmy Hooks in 1954, and his father had started his own store in 1947. And the store was right down the street from Morgan Lindsay, and I worked in the candy counter. And at that time, you bought candy by the ounces. You'd buy 10 cents worth of candy. I had a little scale there, and I'd weigh it out, and then I'd give how many ounces you paid for in a little cellophane bag. We didn't have plastic, it was cellophane. And I'd staple the top of it and hand it to you. And the candy was in big bins all around, and I worked in there, and it was my job to keep it all clean and well stocked. And Jimmy worked right down the street, and I had met him at school, but when he realized I was working down there, he came down pretty often to buy candy from me. But this is, and I saw lots and lots of soldiers too. They come in and they bought candy and they bought, well, a dime. It was called Morgan Lindsay 5 and 10 cent store, but it was, don't know if we, something like the dollar stores now. Just had a little bit of everything. But Jimmy and I married and we left and we were gone for about 3.5 years. And when we come back, our son was born here. And Jimmy went to work with his father. And we moved the store from down on South Washington up to North Washington. And Jimmy and I bought the buildings. We have saved 4 buildings downtown because most of the people that owned them didn't live in town and they had just let them deteriorate. Every building we went into, the first thing we had to do was put in a new roof. Then we had to put all new electrical wiring because they hadn't wired them good and they had just sat there for years with this old wiring. But it was interesting saving these old buildings. Our main store now on North Washington was the Uptown Theater. And we had lots of entertainment in the Uptown Theater. I can remember going there and seeing several, the movies, of course. We saw all the old movies, but I can remember them bringing in people who were famous. One of them was Al Lash LaRue, and he came from Louisiana, and he was a soldier. When he got out, they made a movie star out of him because he was a war hero. But he had a whip, and he could take a cigarette out of a man's mouth. But that was our entertainment, things we see on TV now. But it was very interesting being able to save these old buildings. The Uptown Theater was first a barbershop back during the lumber days. And we came across an old sign painted on the brick on the wall when we were renovating it. And it was painted with a paintbrush, and it said, "Hot baths, 50 cents." So it was the barbershop, and people would come in from working in the lumber yards and bringing in the timber and everything, and they would come in there, and I guess they'd get a shave and a haircut and a hot bath. But the back of the building was a mortuary, and I still have some. Those people never threw anything away. I still have some of the old bottles that had embalming fluid in them. And I came across these rolling, handmade, rolling little looked like a cart, but the thing was 8 feet long and about 24, 25 inches wide with rollers on it. Well, I took some of them home, and they're still at my house. We made a storeroom, and I used them for shelves. We built shelves around the storeroom in them. But come to find out, that's what they used to move the coffins around on. But the back of the store had great big double doors, and the cement ramp is still there. But they brought the horse-drawn carriages in to go and have for the funerals. And I don't have any pictures, but that would be very interesting to see one of those horse-drawn hearses. But it's so interesting to do these old buildings, and the thing we come across. One of the signs that we have that was up in the attics is bring your whole family to see a movie on Friday night for 75 cents. The whole family can come in. And there's not much, wasn't much left. The old theater seats, I have had them recovered, and we put them back in our shoe department and fitting. But do you know that most people can't sit in those seats right now? I can sit in them, but they're lower to the ground. and they're not very big. So we have had to put in bigger seats for bigger people. But we've seen things change, and things you don't realize are changing so much, particularly the size of people. But a man who is 6'2" and probably weighs close to 200 pounds would not be comfortable in those old theater seats now. But I can't think of anything else to say about it. I do know I have enjoyed this community in DeRidder, and I've enjoyed growing up here. And to show you how things have changed, I learned to drive when I was 10 years old, and I drove the truck in the hayfield for my dad and the men to load hay onto the back of the truck. And back then it was this old 4-in-the-floor stick shift, and I can remember popping that thing, and they'd yell at me to stop doing that, which I couldn't help because I barely could sit on the edge of the seat and reach the gas pedal. But I was the oldest of 6 children, and we used to come to the theater on Sunday afternoon, and I would drive that old truck, and I would park it across from where the library is right now. And I'd park it there because I couldn't hardly get the thing in reverse. So I could park it there, and my brothers and sisters, we'd all go to the movie, we'd come out, and I could go around and never have to put it in reverse. But, I know I didn't have a driver's license because I remember getting my driver's license when I was about 16. But here I was at 14 years old driving that truck to town. So we lived in a very interesting, different life, and things have changed so much. And it really wasn't dangerous, me driving, because the traffic only went about 25 to 30 miles an hour. We had gravel roads, and it wasn't safe to go very fast. But it was very interesting, and I can't think of anything else to say.
Well, how many people lived in DeRidder about the time of World War II?
I'm not sure. I have a picture that was taken in the early 50s, and it shows the downtown streets of DeRidder, and you could count the light posts. There was only about 20 light posts. So I'm not sure how many people lived in DeRidder at that time. We thought there was a lot of people, Mm-hmm. But we knew most of the people. And it was, you saw them in school or saw them in church. And
Mm-hmm.
the schools and the church were most of our entertainment. And this civic center, I can remember when we were in junior high, the PTO organization, the Parent Teachers Organization, would have parties down here and dances. And they had a jukebox back there where the stage is. And the PTO would put quarters back there, just a dish full of quarters, and we'd play the songs we'd play them on the jukebox, and that's what we learned to dance to. And we enjoyed it.
Is that the jukebox over there?
No, that's not the jukebox. The one that we had was a big round one. Yeah, it was a big round one. And but we enjoyed the music, and other than listening to the radio, we didn't have much music.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I thought that was wonderful.
Well, I wish I could think of some more.
I